Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 13 of the Christmas lights ornament tutorial. This is the Christmas lights ornament that we are making. It is so cute and colorful. And today we're going to be doing the unit called Top Bow. If you haven't seen parts 1 through 12 yet, that's okay. You can do these out of order. I'll have those videos listed down below in the description. That way when you finish this one, you can go back and watch those. We just have a few materials to get ready, so let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we're going to be using in today's video are all Miyuki Delicas. I have opaque dark cranberry, silver lined green, white pearl AB, opaque delphinium, and opaque yellow AB. Just to keep it simple, I'm going to call this red, green, white, blue, and yellow. We're also going to need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire in the color crystal, and I use the 4-pound thread. You can also use 6-pound thread. And I like to use the size 10 beading needle. You can use a size 12 if that's what you have. For implements, I like to use long nose pliers to hold on to my thread at the end of the video, and I also cut my thread with scissors. And then in the beginning of this video, I'm going to show you how to use the fire method to end your tail. We just need to thread our needle with 3 feet of thread, and then we can get started. So I've threaded my needle, and now I'm going to pick up my first 3 beads, which are all red beads. Now I have my 3 red beads. Let's pull them down to the end of the thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. And now we're going to tie a square knot, which means we're going to cross over on top and then pull the tail through, and then cross over on the top again and pull the tail through. And then you should have what looks like a little snowman. Now I'm going to put my 2 fingers in the lower loop that has the beads in it, and I'm going to pull on the long thread and the tail thread until that top loop turns into a knot. Now I have my tail thread, or my tail right here. Now I'm not going to touch it to the flame, but I am going to get super close so that it melts the tip. Just a little teeny bit, and it turns into this tiny little bead or tiny little knot. And so now, keeping my fingers in the loop, I'm going to twist the loop while I'm pulling the long thread until that little knot touches the long thread. It just meets it right there. Now I'm going to take that knot and I'm going to pull it down to the beads with my thumbnail until the beads are in a tight little triangle, just like that, and that completes row number 1. So I'm going to actually tug the knot to one side so that it looks like it's coming out of one of the beads. And now we can pick up our next 2 beads. Let's pick up 2 red beads. And it looks like we're coming out of this bead, so I'm going to sew through the next bead, the one that knot is furthest from. And I'm going to try to get those 2 new beads to sit right on top of the beads that they're right next to their buddy beads. Okay, let's pick up 2 more red beads. And we're coming out of this bead, so let's sew through the next. Once again, making sure that those beads are sitting right on top of their buddies. And let's pick up 2 more red beads. And we're coming out of this bead, we're going to sew through the next, and we're also going to sew through its buddy. So we're sewing through 2 beads this time, and each time we sew through 2 beads, it brings our thread into a position to start the next row. We call that stepping up. And so now we have completed row number 2, and we are in position to start row number 3. Let's start by picking up 2 red beads and sewing through the next. Always making sure that those beads are sitting on top of their buddies. Now let's pick up 1 green bead. We're coming out of this bead right here, the second one. So the next bead would be this one that's setting downward. We're going to skip the one that's setting downward, and we're going to sew through the one that's poking up. I'm going to call this our up bead. Now let's pick up 2 red beads and sew through the next bead. Let's pick up 1 green, skipping the down bead, we're going to sew through the up bead. Let's pick up 2 red beads and sew through the next. And pick up 1 green bead. This is the last bead in this row, so we're skipping the down bead. We're going to sew through the up bead and through its buddy. So we're sewing through the last 2 beads in this row, which completes row number 3, and we get to start row number 4 now. Let's start with 2 green beads this time and sew through the next. Now we pick up 1 red, sew through the up, pick up 1 red and sew through the up. I like to turn my work as I go. It just makes it easier to sew that way. You might want to do the same if it makes it easier for you too. So now let's pick up 1 green and 1 red and sew through the next. Let's pick up 1 red, sew through the up bead, 1 red, and sew through the up. Let's pick up 1 red and 1 green and sew through the next. One red and 1 red. This is the last bead in this row, so let's sew through the last 2 beads. And now we're ready to start row number 5. Let's start with 2 white beads. Then 1 red, 1 green, 1 red, 2 green, 1 red, 1 green, 1 red, 2 green, 1 red, 1 green, 1 red. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 6. Let's start with 2 white beads. One white, 1 red, 1 red, 1 green, 1 blue, and 1 green. One red, 1 red, 1 red, 1 red, 2 green beads, 1 green, 1 red, 1 red, 1 white bead. Sewing through the last 2 beads. And now we get to start row 7. Let's start with 2 white beads. One white, 1 red, 1 red, 1 red, 1 green, 2 green beads, 1 green, 1 red, 1 green, 1 red, 1 green, 2 green beads, 1 green, 1 red, 1 red, 1 red, and 1 white bead. And let's sew through the last 2 beads. And this is actually the top of our triangle right here. So we're not going to add beads to this corner. Instead, what we're going to do is we're not adding any beads. We're just going to sew down the next bead. Just like that. And that puts our thread in position to start row number 8. So let's start row 8 with 1 white bead, 1 white, 1 red, 1 red, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green and 1 white, 1 white, 1 red, 1 red, 1 red, 1 red, 1 white, 1 white and 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 red, 1 red, 1 white, and 1 white. We are back up to the top of our triangle. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to turn directions. We're going to start going down this side. So row number 9 starts with 1 white bead, and we're going to actually sew down this side. So what we're going to do, first I'm going to just sew it up. And now, just because I'm very right-handed and I like to sew downwards, I'm going to turn my triangle over so that I can just sew my row 9 in a downward position. So if you're right-handed and you also like to sew in a downward position, go ahead and flip it over like I did. And this will be the second bead in this row. It's 1 white. 1 green, 1 red, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 blue and 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 red, 1 white, 1 red, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 red, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 white. And you'll notice we don't have an up bead to sew through on this upper part because we're up at the top of our triangle again. So even though we have our last bead on our needle, what we're going to do is we're going to have to turn it upside down and sew down that top bead. And it will pop that last bead right into place. Now we're going to turn our thread. So we're coming out of what looks like the top, because I have it upside down, but it's the bottom of this bead. So we're going to sew through the bead right below it. And then we're going to change directions. We're coming out this way on this bead. So we're going to go the opposite way through the bead right next to that one. And then we're going to sew up that bead that we started in and down the bead that we just added. And now we are in position to start row number 10 going this way, but because I like to sew downwards, I'm going to turn my unit over. And now we are ready to start row number 10 with 1 white, 1 white, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 white, 1 red, 1 white, 1 white, 1 red, 1 white, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 white. We're back up to the top of our triangle, so let's turn it over. And now we are ready to start row 11 with 1 white bead, 1 white, 1 green, 1 green, 1 red, 1 green, 1 green, 1 white, 2 white beads, 1 white, 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 1 red, 2 white beads, 1 white, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 green, 1 yellow, 1 white, and 1 white. Once again, we're up at the top. We need to sew down that top bead. Then we're going to sew down the middle bead in the second row, and then up the bead right next to that one, and then up the middle bead on the top row, and then down the bead that we just added. I'm going to flip over my triangle, and now we get to start row 12. Let's start with one white bead, one white, one green, one green, one green, one green, one green, one white, two white beads, one white, 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 two white beads, one white, one green, one green, one green, one green, one green, one white, and one white. We're back up to the top. Let's flip it over, and this completes our 12th row. So now we're going to add connection rows. So if this is the first triangle that you've ever done with me, I always add connection beads to some sides and maybe not others. Every unit is different, and that way all of the units can connect to each other. And that's how we complete our project and make the whole ornament. So in this particular unit, we are going to have connection beads down this right side. We're also going to have connection beads on the bottom, but we're not going to have any on this left side. So let's start our right side of connection beads with one white, one white, one green, 1 green, 1 green, oops, I think I might have a knot in my thread. I do. Let me show you how I solve that. Well, first of all, I'm sewing through. Okay, let's get that bead in there. Okay, so I have this little knot in my thread, and if we're lucky, we can just take these two threads and pull them apart, and it just comes undone. If we catch it right when we feel that knot happening, sometimes that's as easy as it gets, just like that. And I try to catch it as soon as I see a knot. That way it doesn't get into like a double knot or anything. That's when we start cutting our thread, and you know, that's just a headache. We like to keep it as simple as possible to keep us beading, because that's what we love, right? So, okay, we now are going to add 1 green, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 white. Now we are at the corner point of our triangle, so we're going to cap it with 1 white bead, turning that end into a point. And now let's add beads along the bottom of our triangle. Let's start with 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 yellow, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, 1 white, and 1 white. Now we are at our next corner. Let's cap it with 1 white bead, turning it into a point. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over my unit. I'm going to sew up 6 beads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now I'm going to do what I call a zigzag. We're coming out of the top of this blue bead. Let's sew down the green bead right next to it, and up the green bead right next to that one. Then sew up 2 beads, 1 and 2, and let's do that zigzag again. We're coming out of the top of this second green bead. Let's sew down the 3rd bead, which is the bead right next to it, and up the bead right next to that one, and then sew up 2 more rows or 2 more beads, 1 and 2. And now I feel that this corner bead is super secure, so I'm going to cut my thread. Let's hold our thread with our long nose pliers, and then try to get our scissors as close to the bead as possible without cutting the bead. Snip off the thread, and now you have completed your top bow unit. It is so cute. I'm having so fun with this. I hope you are too. I didn't do a question of the day, so my question is this. Okay, so When I decorate for Christmas, I tend to change my themes, like my colors, depending on what kind of wrapping paper I happen to purchase that year for wrapping all the presents. So that's how I do up my tree. I hang up all my ornaments and then I add the color like to match all the presents in garland, or I'll make an extra couple of ornaments in that particular color, whatever the color may be. Like last year it was purple. So I had like purple garland and a lot of purple lights and stuff like that. So I have not done the traditional green and red in years. So I think I might have to do that this year. What do you do? Do you change it up? I want to hear in the comments what you girls do or what you guys do. In the comments, do you change it up every year, or do you keep the traditional red and green, or do you traditionally keep the same like pink tree or whatever? Let me know. I'm so curious. Alrighty, well, we have finished this unit. We only need one of them, so I will see you in a second. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.